Good evening, everyone. Welcome to St. Mary's. I'm Father Mike McGovern, the pastor, and want to welcome in a special way any visitors we have this evening. We hope you have an enjoyable stay. A reminder that we've already begun to use some of the musical settings for the new translation of the Roman Missal. So during Mass, the Gloria, the Sanctus, the Memorial Acclamation, those will all be from the card that's in the pews. So please use the card and the music and text to help us to join together in the singing. Tonight also we have the fourth in our series of positive preachers, and our preacher tonight, the priest offering the Mass and giving the homily, is no stranger to St. Mary's. Father Gustafson served as associate pastor here at St. Mary's from 1999 to 2004. He's presently the pastor of Our Lady of Ransom Parish in Niles, Illinois, and we're very glad to have Father Chris back with us tonight. That we know he made many friends here and also served very capably as an associate pastor, as a priest, a good priest serving the people here at St. Mary's. And so we're very pleased and proud and glad to welcome him back this evening for Mass tonight.
Once again, wonderful to be with you. As I look at you, I realize that my hairline's receded a bit more and I've gotten a little thicker around the middle, but you all look the same and you all look great. I almost actually was going to be a little late. I left plenty of time, I thought, and I got a couple of blocks from my driveway, and the lights went on. I got pulled over. And I thought, you get that sinking feeling. And I wasn't paying much attention, and I thought, geez, was I speeding? I guess I was. And all I'm thinking is, I don't want to be late, and maybe I'm wearing the collar, maybe if I get lucky here. So sure enough, I pull over, and it's on the side street, and of course, when you're in your parish, everyone's going to see who got pulled over. So as I pull over, and the squad pulls behind me, and it's unmarked, but the light's going, and then pulled up beside me, and I'm like, what is that? Well, the window goes down, and it turns out that the new police chaplain, who's a friend of mine, happened to pull me over. He says, feels good, doesn't it? So we chuckled for a little bit, and fortunately I felt forgiven. I felt like, okay, I got away with it, and I got here on time. I know this is positive preaching, and I know Father Mike is probably going for some alliteration there, but I'm thinking, what does that mean, that it's negative the rest of the time? It's positive, and I think that means, as someone said on the way in, about motivation. And sometimes I think about how Christ preached, and it wasn't real upbeat positive, but it was motivating. In the past several weeks, we've been hearing wonderful parables. Jesus taught with parables. And when he tells the parables, you find yourself in them, and they're challenging. If you remember, there was a parable about if you will, last week, 2 weeks ago, about the son who said yes when his father asked him to do something and then didn't do it, and then the other one said no but went ahead and did it. Well, who's the audience? The Pharisees. They're feeling very challenged because they're saying, you didn't do it. Jesus is saying to them. Those kinds of things are present in those parables, and Jesus invites us to be caught in them, to find ourselves in them, to be challenged by them. But today, what we see is something different. This is actually a confrontation. Jesus is approached by the Pharisees, who feel challenged by his teachings, but also by the Herodians. And the Herodians and the Pharisees would never mix with one another. The Herodians, if you know, Herod was a puppet king. He wasn't a good Jew. He was put in power by the Romans and lived a lavish life, often oppressing even his own people, but certainly not a good Jew. The Pharisees were intensely good. They were strict observers, separate ones, they called themselves. That's what Pharisee means. So never would these two mix, except, as they say, politics makes strange bedfellows. They unite in their opposition to Christ, to Jesus. And so they come to him with a profound question. I mean, it's really well mastered, because there's no good answer to this. If Jesus says, yeah, pay taxes to Caesar, then all the faithful Jews who know that we only recognize one God as our king and that we shouldn't recognize or only under being forced to pay a tax to the king whose inscription or image is there, then they'll be alienated. And if he says don't pay, then the Herodians who are with the Romans, he'll be arrested. And so there's no good answer except the answer he gives. Whose image? And notice, he doesn't have a coin in his pocket, they do. Whose image is on the coin and whose inscription? Caesar's. Then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. It's all about what is God's. Whose image do we bear? All the Jews that were there would recognize that the very first book of the Torah, in the story of creation, says that the human person, male and female, are created in the image of God. And so, yes, this gold give to Caesar, but you know what? You got to give yourself to God. You're marked with his inscription. Just about a month and a half ago, I was very fortunate to do something I hope that you've had the opportunity to do. But my family, and we're very close, and we get together for family parties and celebrations, etc. But we never went away together and spent like 4 days, 3 nights, 4 days together. And so we decided to do it this year when we went up to Wisconsin Dells, but actually on the lake. We had 3 condos, and there was opportunities for the kids for a lot of activities, as you know, is up there, you know. Go-karting and the swimming, and we did some boating, there was golfing, and there were all these wonderful activities. But the best part of the vacation, of that time together, was the first night when we sat around the bonfire, and each of us, I asked everyone to say, tell us, give 2 minutes of something that's important to you in your life right now. And it was wonderful, the 26 of us, from 7 years old to actually 79 years old. And we went and did that. And then the next day, to celebrate the Holy Eucharist there. And then to have a meal and to do parlor games, if you will. It was game night. And all of us together. And I know that everyone, when we left, did a lot of activities, and those were fun. But the thing that we appreciated the most was our relationship. The time we spent with one another, sharing with one another, caring for one another, loving one another. It's all about relationship. We're created in the image and likeness of God, which means imprinted within us is the Blessed Trinity. That's a relationship. It's all, God exists as a communion of life and love. And we know we're at our best when we are in a good relationship with one another. And we're at our worst when we're not. Render unto God what is God's. How do we render unto God what he most wants? Well, I'd like to suggest to you that, among other things, first and foremost of how we render to God what he deserves and what he wants is our relationships. And what I mean is this: forgiveness. Sometimes people will ask me, what's the thing, what do you like about priesthood? What's a challenge for you about priesthood? But the question I like too is, what surprises you most? I've been a priest now for 16 years. And someone asked that to me recently, and I said, you know what, I got to think about that. And I took some time, and I thought about it, and I couldn't quite get my hand around it, and then I identified it. And it strikes me right now, what surprises me at this point of my priesthood more than anything else, is that there is a lot of unforgiveness among us. And that surprises me. There are a lot of people who hold unforgiveness in their hearts for their brothers and sisters, for their wives, their husbands, for their brother-in-law, for their whatever. Good people, people who come to Mass, people who believe in the faith, priests, all of us are capable of holding unforgiveness in our hearts. And I'm here to tell you, and I know this is supposed to be positive preaching, which means to motivate, unless you forgive everyone, you're going to hell. And I know that brings a snicker, because we're not used to hearing it. People will say, Father, how come nobody talks about hell anymore? Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm talking about hell. Hell is unforgiveness. And we cannot share in the life of God with an unforgiving heart. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the forgiveness of God. That's who he is. To be a Christian, to be a disciple means I need to forgive. Look at our symbol. It's a symbol of horrible torture and death. We'd be insane to look at it and work, for our faith unless we understood when we do that that's a symbol of forgiveness. Christ takes all of our sin, all of our betrayal, all of our evil, and takes it to himself and dies for us, that we might not go to hell, that we be reconciled with the Father, that we live in his image, the image of a forgiving God, and that be what defines us. And it's so important because you know what? There's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of hurt. There are people I know, and many of you, like me, the times we feel betrayed. We feel someone has stabbed us in the back. We feel that we've forgiven and we just can't forgive anymore. It doesn't get any better in that relationship. Friends, we got to keep forgiving. That's what it is to render unto God what is God's. Jesus says, unless you take up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of the kingdom. What does it mean to take up the cross? I think sometimes we think taking up the cross means I shoulder my burdens. Well, you know what? Not really. Everyone's got to shoulder their burdens. Everyone's got their crosses. We've domesticated it a bit. When Jesus says, unless you take up the cross, that means unless you forgive your brother from your heart, which he says, you are not worthy of the kingdom. We need to forgive. And it's hard. But sometimes I think it's hard because we don't really understand it. Sometimes we think that if I forgive, I'm actually telling the person that what they did is okay. Nothing could be further from the truth. If it's okay, I don't need to forgive it. What I'm saying is, when I forgive, what you did was terrible, was awful, was unjust, was undeserved. But I forgive you. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because God has forgiven me and I don't deserve it. And in God's name, I forgive you. That's who we're called to be. And that's not easy, but it's true. I think sometimes we think if I forgive, it means I have to forget. And so I've had people say, I just can't forget what was done to me. And so I can't forgive them. And I say, who told you had to forget? Well, Jesus did, didn't he? That's not in the Bible. That's a nice expression, to forgive and forget. We can't forget. If our best friend stabs us in the back, we're not going to forget that. If our spouse violates our marriage and our trust, I'm not going to forget that. There is a healthy sense, certainly, where I don't dwell on it, but I won't forget it. If my brother died in the World Trade Center, I'm not going to forget that or why that happened, and nor should I. To forgive is to take in our past situation and our present circumstances and allow God's grace to transform it. To go to the hurt and the violation in the past and in the present, say, God, your forgiveness must come to bear. And so God's grace comes and transforms the pain and the evil that locks us and now releases us, even as we release others. To love God means to love our neighbor. To be forgiven by God means to forgive our neighbor. In Our Father, there are 7 petitions. Only one has a condition, and it has to do with forgiveness. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. In other words, if we don't forgive our brother, then God don't forgive me. And if we are not forgiven, we are truly in hell. here on earth and forever in eternity. Hell is unforgiveness, both in the giving and in the receiving. So, what do we do about it? I know there are unbelievable stories of forgiveness. You remember the situation, the horrible scene in the Amish, I think it was Pennsylvania, but a couple of years ago. The Amish school, the gunman that goes in and slaughters some 35 children. The parents of those children go to the parent of the gunman and embrace them, forgiving them for not raising a better son, but also forgiving the son, in a sense, through them. What an ultimate expression. I know, I've heard the audio of a beautiful exchange, a story of a woman on the west side of Chicago, actually. Her son was 14 years old, killed by a gangbanger who she knew in the neighborhood. He was arrested, put in prison, went through the trial, was in jail. She prayed, God, how could this happen? And I know this young man, and I knew him to be good before, and he did this to my son. And so she went to prison, and she went to visit him, and she would say to him, how did you do this? And he had nothing to say. And she'd go back. And then she said, I forgive you. And she went back every year, multiple times, to visit him. And she forgave him every time. When he got out of jail 18 years later, and it's now 21 years, when he got out of jail 18 years later, he went to live with her. She invited him into her home. She said, I will not allow the death of my son or his life's meaning to hold me in unforgiveness. I forgive, and now I'm called to be the mother to this man. That's someone created in the image of God who gets it. So, folks, I'm going to invite you with me this week to take some time in church, at home, in a quiet place, close the door, and earnestly from your heart say, Lord, show me any unforgiveness that there is in my heart. Some may pop up right away. Some people that we've been in enmity with. And Lord, remove that unforgiveness. Help me to get rid of it. Help my heart to beat again, fully, as you desire. And then to go through and to forgive everyone in our life. Because you know what? There are horrendous deeds that have been done to us we need to forgive. We need to forgive people, if you will, for what they haven't done, things that they should have done for us. But sometimes we just need to forgive people for not being who we want them to be. Husbands need to forgive their wives for not being the wife that you wanted her to be today. Wives need to forgive their husbands the same way. Children need to forgive their parents for not being the parent I wanted you to be. How much unforgiveness is there about that? Parents need to forgive their children. We need to forgive our neighbors. We need to forgive our friends. And so there's a part of us that holds resentment and unforgiveness. Render unto God what is God's. Render him a full, loving, forgiving heart. When we do, that's the positive part. Then we truly are living in the image of God, with an inner peace and an inner strength and an inner love that will draw people to Christ through us because they see God's image in us.